Okay, I'm here with Dominic Rahtz, and we're going to have another conversation about where video falls within the world of art and what it means or doesn't mean, and also, I guess for me, partly trying to figure out what art is to an extent, and or understand better where it is, and so answering your last question, I thought I was making video things to start with, but they were taking video and doing stuff to video that was old. And when I say video, I use video to encompass anything that is moving image. I know people get very, all sort of like, well, no, that's film, or no, that's video. But the fact is, it's all files now, or whatever it was. The stuff I was using was Super 8, in fact, so it was film, but I don't think of it as film. I think it just it's video.
Just
moving images. And I thought I was doing video things, but in fact I was doing things to that and then showing it. And so ultimately when I take a step back, it feels a bit more performative. And so I'm trying to figure out, why does video get to be art? Or, in my all-encompassing thing, why is it? How does it fit in? Where does art start? Where does art? What are the confines or boundaries, or even very rough rules of it? Is there? I mean, is Coronation Street art?
Well, I think that's a huge question, which no one really fully knows the answer to.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I suppose art is what counts as art for people. And so that means that it's sort of people think of it in relation to other art, I suppose. So it's not like you can just have a straightforward definition of what it is. It's a set of practices and activities and objects and things which kind of over a period of time sort of settle into some kind of a collection of things that count as art.
Mm-hmm.
But the concept of art is quite difficult to pin down, because it's almost like examples are continually being added because there's just ongoing art practice that's done in the light of previous practice. So it's continually changing anyway. So I think it's I always think that what is art question is a bit kind of it's the kind of wrong question to ask, really. It's like, perhaps the better question to ask is, what does it do? What's its function at any particular moment? And obviously this function changes over time. So it's like thinking about it, what is it doing and in what context and things like that. What is it doing? What is the artist intending to do? What is the viewer getting from it as well? What's the experience that's involved? So it's not so much what it is, but what's it doing, I think, is probably more important. And that might be a kind of a freeing kind of way of thinking about it as well.
So what is art doing?
So if you think about Coronation Street, it's not intended as art, so it doesn't count as art, but someone could recontextualize it potentially and say it's art, but then it's intended as art, and then it comes under consideration to be possibly art, and then you make a judgment about it within that context. But it would need an artist to do that. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So
what is art doing at the moment then, at this era that we live in?
Well, I think that again is a quite difficult thing to pin down, because it's engaging with a lot of things. I mean, I think everyone has their sort of, I suppose, their kind of idea about what's going on in art at the moment. And if I was going to say some things that I think are going on, I think there's quite a lot of engagement with, say, technology and the role of technology in our lives. I think there's some kind of ethical issues being dealt with. Maybe kind of ecological issues, or maybe kind of issues to do with identity and things like that. There's a whole kind of range of things that kind of artists are dealing with. So and I suppose they're kind of wider issues that you can't just say that they're art issues. They're kind of wider issues, but artists are kind of taking them on through work which is done, in the light of previous art. So I think there's obviously a huge range of things that are going on at the moment, and it's like thinking about what is art engaging with, and how is it positioned with respect to other things in the world.
So is it fair to say that now art will generally have something to say about something?
Yeah, not always, because lots of art kind of refuses that kind of aboutness, if you like. It kind of deals with things that are sort of it kind of intrinsic to itself, as a particular kind of object. So you might get sort of works of art that are quite kind of abstract or quite kind of self-referential. There's a kind of I suppose there's a type of object being created, but it's a new sort of object that exists in the world. So, there's lots of kind of, I suppose, sculptural work that's often like that it's kind of engaged in its own kind of object kind of character. So it's not necessarily about something, but it's sort of, it's an instance of something in the world, or it's a new kind of thing that's put into the world, for consideration as art. So their kind of aboutness is like, that's another interesting question to ask as well. You can think about what is art about, and does it need to be about anything? In the sense that you have an artwork and you think, well, what is it about? And what it's about is something over there, it's something outside of it. It's a kind of a question of representation, I suppose. But certainly if you're dealing with images, which it sounds like you are, there'd be, there would be that representational relationship between the work and what it's a representation of, as being an image of something. But all art is, not all art is quite like that. It doesn't set itself up necessarily in terms of representation, but you can always interpret it as something. It can always represent something if you interpret it.
So if I go to Whitstable and go to a gift shop there and buy a seashell that someone's painted a picture of the beach on. Yeah. What's that? What's that about? What's that?
I think that's just what it's intended to be by whoever made it. So.
I mean, there are things I like and things I don't like, and but I'm very conscious that because I like them or I don't like them doesn't mean anything. Yeah. Doesn't mean anything in the bigger picture of what is or isn't, or is relevant or isn't relevant, or is art or isn't art, or whatever. When I see something like that, I don't. It doesn't do anything to me. It leaves me. My heartbeat doesn't change. Whereas I might go into a gallery and see. First time I saw William Kentridge or something like that. Like, oh my God, there's something going on. Something going on here, isn't it? It wants me to think. It wants me to care.
Yeah, no, that's right.
And the seashell doesn't.
Yeah, so that's another part of art, I suppose, is the way it affects you, and how what that affective nature is. How is it? What's your experience? And what are you thinking and feeling when you're looking at something, an artwork? And that's again that's something that is varies for different people, and that's kind of wrapped up in the idea of art. I suppose that's kind of this aesthetic dimension.
I suppose I feel like I keep on coming across little hints or little guides or something that are saying or pushing me or guiding me or saying something about art. Like every so often, not every so often, I've read all over the place that with the invention of the camera and film and good pictures, why would you paint a portrait? Why would you paint a landscape when it can be done so much better than. And so that seems like some kind of sign, some kind of semiotic to me to like, oh, well then, no, you should be thinking this way. But why? Why does that make a portrait or a landscape any less desirable? Not that I have any interest in painting either, nor can I either. But
why does it?
Why would people say, well, I'm not going to do portraits or landscapes anymore because we have film, we have camera, you go take a picture or whatever, or Picasso is amongst, many people have said that. Why?
Yeah. That's a big part. I suppose that's a big part of the history of photography and painting, when seen together, is that photography was seen as sort of displacing painting as being a kind of like a form of I suppose, naturalistic representation, or at least a kind of fairly kind of truthful sort of form of representation.
Mm-hmm.
And because, you know, photography kind of provided almost like, you know, I suppose like, well, how people thought of it is more complicated than that, but how people thought of it was a kind of, it's like almost like an automatic representation, you know, because it's a particular sort of mechanical device that is used to kind of produce an image that I suppose people have interpreted it as having a certain kind of objectivity and a kind of as producing an accurate image of what's in front of it in some way. But there's a lot of stuff written about that idea, and it's not as clear as it might first seem, or it's not as obvious as it might seem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's more complex than that. You know, so you know that's really, there's a whole area of photography theory that kind of deals with those sorts of questions, relationship between photography and painting, as forms of representation of the world, and it's
right.
making a certain kind of claim to being able to depict reality in the most kind of truthful way, if you like. But I think when you're thinking about this, I mean, if you're working in that area, you know, it might be, you know, one of the ways that, I mean, you were saying that you were thinking about in terms of moving images and stuff, and that there are, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's film or video or whatever, but it's almost like you can also think of those things as mediums as well. Yeah. So you think about painting as a particular sort of medium, you know, it's a means of representing the world in some way.
Yeah.
And but you can think of photography in the same way. It's a medium that's used to represent the world, and you can think of video and film as well. And then it becomes quite important, actually, a distinction between film and video, because there are different, you know, it's materially different. You know, so when you have film, celluloid film,
yeah.
you know, it's a certain process that's happening there.
Yes.
In terms of how it registers light,
yes.
things like that. And then you have a different type of technical object as well that you're using as well, you know, a camera, a particular type of camera.
Yeah.
But you could say that in video there's something different going on because it registers light in a different way and captures it. You know, it's more of an electronic means. Then it's a different medium, you know, and then it produces different types of images and makes people think in a different way. And certainly if you think about like the early kind of history of video in art, you'd say that one of the things that people experimented with quite a lot with is duration, because with film, quite often if you're using like sort of kind of like handheld cameras and things, you're often restricted to 3 minutes because that is the
load.
Sort of that's the length of the film.
Yeah.
You know, say like a sort of 8mm film or something like that. You know, whereas video, you can keep it going on forever, and actually you can also set it up so that it kind of records over itself as well. So you can almost have a limitless duration. And certainly some people who kind of experimented with video early on were really interested in that sense of kind of endless duration. So in that sense, it's a different medium because it will show the world in a different way because it won't be constrained by time. So, and I think this relates to performance as well. So if you're interested in performance, I mean, a good artist to look at maybe there is like someone like Bruce Nauman, who
yes.
did a lot of, I'm sure you know Bruce Nauman.
Yeah.
Who's, in his kind of early pieces using video, but they were very performative as well. He was filming himself usually, and but they're long duration video pieces, and that's kind of built into the work. So I think they are kind of different mediums.
They are, yes. Though I feel that years ago we went to the point where whether you shot it on film or video, it all ended up on video.
Yeah, and now of course
and now
digital.
It's just files, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
It's a strange thing.
That's right.
Everything's become a file, and with film there was the slight degradation, isn't there? If you make a copy of a film that it's going to go down. And video had that same thing. You're always trying to save generations when you're editing it. And now a file is
digital doesn't degrade.
Just is, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's kind of it's weird. It's strange because it doesn't materially exist in a way. but it kind of feels like it's eternal at the same time.
Yeah, yes.
So it's got a curious kind of existence, you know.
Yes. I mean, I put my clips and stuff that I'm using and what have you on YouTube, and I don't have a large library there at all. 40 pieces, I don't know, something like that or something.
Yeah.
But then I think of how many Instagram posts I've got,
Yeah.
and then how many TikTok posts my kids have.
Yeah.
And it's just this, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to even comprehend what will we make of all of this one day, and if large language models start getting trained, not just on stuff that we hope to have been factual stuff, but start training it on social media too.
Yeah.
What will come out of that? What?
Yeah. Well,
what
that's already
bizarreness.
happening. I think. You know, I don't know if you've come across the AI generated video things that are going on at the moment.
Yes.
But they're just incredible, but a bit disturbing at the same time about how sort of how powerful they are. You know.
Well, any concept of truth.
Yeah.
Or rather, what is real or what is not. And I heard a really interesting thing on. I was listening on the way here to Rory Campbell, to Alistair Campbell and Rory, what's the name on their podcast, and they were saying that when they've done polls about polls, the vast majority of people are not getting their information from reading something or listening to a debate or anything like that. They're getting it from a comment on TikTok or a comment on Facebook or a poll, even just a poll of what supposedly is going on. And that's an obtuse and weird thing, isn't it? I think that people are reacting to.
Yeah. I mean, the whole world of sort of images and information that is kind of characterises our present. Yeah, it's quite bewildering, really. And to think about what the implications of that are. But I think, you know, again, it's something that, you know, artists can take on. You know, I mentioned earlier that, you know, I think kind of technology is one of the things that artists are kind of dealing with. You know, is that it would definitely encompass that kind of thing. You know, that change in the way that information is generated and sort of disseminated. You know, and it's you know, it changes our experience of the world in a particular sort of way as well. You know, sort of you know, information is instantaneously available to everyone all the time. And it's you know,
and it is. But when you say information, to me, thinking back of growing up, information meant something that was true.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah. And I'm not sure what it really means now. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, well, you can think about that relationship between noise and information, and think that information should be meaningful in some way. But you know,
yes.
But you know, I think there's so much information now that it almost becomes noise in certain ways, because because of its sheer volume. So you know, so kind of to work out in a way what is information actually within this mass of information. What is information that is meaningful? That's quite difficult sometimes to kind of work out.
I think it's really difficult. I think it's really difficult for people to know, especially if you've grown up only knowing noise.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. And I think, you know, those of us a bit older who've kind of lived through the digital revolution, it's like it's hard for us to understand, I think, how young people kind of encounter information and things like that. You know, something that we, you know, as tutors and things, we're always kind of wrestling with is, you know, how that affects, you know, many of the students.
But I'm beginning to doubt where to get good sources of good information from.
Yeah.
I don't even know that the things I thought were good sources are maybe.
Yeah.
Or did we just grow up being told, no, this is just news, there's no opinion attached to this, but in fact there always was underlying, and we just weren't we were too naive and believing, and now you look at it and you go, oh, well, that's clearly a bit that way, and that's clearly a bit that way, and maybe that's just the way it is, and that's how you
Yeah, I mean, one interesting area to think about some of these issues is in thinking in terms of documentary.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you know kind of our colleague Silke, who is a kind of a theorist, but she's her expertise lies in the area of documentary, and she'd be a good person to talk about some of these issues with in terms of film documentary. Because documentary has a claim to truth. Obviously, it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But some of these issues are sort of dealt with in the sort of in the sort of discourse around documentary. So and then also how artists have used the documentary form as well quite often to kind of examine these ideas of truth. So so if you're interested in that area, recommend you talking to Silke.
What I think I want to do next is if this were a space to have a projector here and a camera here, and me setting up stuff, setting up the projector, setting up bits and pieces, cables, whatever, stuff that's involved in it, but then have that being projected live on a wall while that's going on. But then here, where people would walk up to it, have a camera that's facing people walking up, and have a sideways TV screen, like quite a big one, so that when you're standing next to it, you might actually think you were next to another person of the same sort of size. But it would show you. So if you approach my work, you're looking at it, you're reacting, or whatever, but you're seeing yourself on this screen with you looking at my work, but you 10 seconds ago.
Yeah.
Right. So there's this displacement of time. So you're being forced to acknowledge what your reactions were. 10 seconds, which is a very disquieting.
And
absolutely. Vaguely upsetting thing because you can't do anything about what's on the screen.
It's already in the past.
And you can try and change your reactions and be like all cheerful and stuff, and then you're going to see yourself doing that as well. So it's not. It's when I've done little tests of it at home.
It's a bit like kind of early digital cameras that were kind of where there was always a lag.
Yes.
In the sort of,
it's not.
It's always a bit unnerving.
It is. Yes, it's very unnerving. Bizarrely, it's this. Because you don't like how you've reacted. Or you're very aware that someone might get to see again. How you reacted, and maybe you don't want to share that. Maybe that's something that.
But do you know the Bruce Nauman film of the sort of the corridor thing?
No.
Where he's got a projector that's hooked up to a monitor. And I think what happens is that someone walks into a corridor or something, or it's around a corner or something, and then they're looking at the monitor, but they're seeing their own image from behind because the camera is behind them. So there is this, so they're walking towards something and they can see an image of themselves, but it's the image behind, the image is coming from behind them. It's a rear view. So and that's kind of like I think it's a similar kind of structure to what you're thinking about. And I think the other person to maybe look at is Dan Graham as well. Dan Graham's done a lot of work with video too, and particularly about this where how it, I suppose, how it interferes with our sense of our own subjectivity. How it allows us to see our own subjectivity from outside in some way. So it sounds like some of the ideas that you're interested in that piece, in that idea that you described.
Well, I like the idea of being made to see something you've just done. Because so much of what we do, I feel, is off the cuff, judgmental. And frequently not really meant for someone else to see, or certainly not meant to be replayed and relived, and then there it is.
It's a bit like when you catch sight of yourself in a mirror. You know, if you sometimes and you don't recognise yourself at first,
Yeah.
and then you realise it's you.
Yeah.
And then and then there's that kind of sort of slight alienation where you don't you haven't put on any expression for yourself or anything like that. You just sort of see yourself as you probably in reality appear to other people. But you're on a bit. It's always a bit kind of unnerving as well. When you sort of.
I found it massively unnerving. I've in particular, I feel like the last 5 or 6 years, age has sort of finally caught up with me a bit, and I had this image of myself as always sort of being 23.
Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
and then you get into your 30s and you get aged a bit, and you're like, well, it's not so bad, and then maybe you feel you can be 35 for 20 odd years, and then no, you're not. And you tell yourself something in the mirror, you're like,
there's a point where you just can't deny it any longer.
That's not the person I think I am when I'm walking around.
Yeah.
You think there's someone.
Yeah.
And it is very disquieting, very.
Yeah.
Again, unnerving. That whole unnerving thing.
Yeah.
I feel like I've come across lots of things that were unnerving while I've been here. Other ones being, I came across this Super 8 footage of me before I was 5, and I have no memory of the event happening.
Okay.
But obviously it did, because there it is on Super 8.
Yeah.
But every time I see it, I'm like,
that's interesting. Yeah. Have you got film that you can draw on? So
yeah.
Super 8
Yeah. No, I do. I
stuff?
have this Super 8 footage from just before my parents got married.
Yeah.
Until I'm about 14, 15, when, as I always say, either we kids lost interest in being in my dad's Super 8s, or my dad lost interest in taking Super 8s. But they just kind of, boom, stopped.
Yeah.
And when we were kids, every Easter we'd go see my grandparents, and pictures on the wall was what we called as kids seeing Super 8s projected.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things. But my dad never showed the really early ones. It was always the ones where my younger sister was like 3 or 4. From then on, I suppose, so that everybody could feel a part of it or something. So seeing these really early ones was like, whoa, what's that? Where did that's me? I was there.
Yeah.
How did that?
And that's really interesting. There's probably something can do with those films, I would have thought, in terms of an artwork.
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting to use things like that.
Well, I did. The first thing I did was I took the stuff that was really early, and I made a box that was that big, and it was 8 centimeters deep, and covered in tracing paper.
Right. Okay.
And then I put that over the laptop screen.
Right. Okay.
And you just get 15 blobs of colour.
Right.
So
okay.
each one sort of behaves, each thing, the depth, that much depth, I don't know why, and I just happened upon that thing.
Right,
I was like, I'll make a box, and here's some cardboard, and it happened to be that thick, and I put all these things together before I made a wooden one. And it turned, I mean, if you think Super 8's fairly low resolution already, but it's still, I don't know, maybe there's 1 million pixels in there per frame or something, but it reduces it to 15 pixels.
Right.
So you just and it was really interesting. I felt a bit more comfortable sharing that with people than the original footage, which because people would be like, oh, look at you must be, and because I had no memory of the thing, I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe oh, you think I was that? Well, I don't know, because I can't remember. Maybe I was.
Yeah. So you've scanned the film then?
I did. I took it. My dad had given it to me ages and ages ago, and I did nothing with it. It sat around for ages, and then finally I took it to, what was it called, Happy Snaps or something?
Right.
Something like that, and said, look, can you do
they
something with it?
It for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah. I mean, obviously the original films are quite precious. So you've got to be a bit careful. Can get chewed up in projectors and things like that.
Well, that's another memory of being a kid at Easter and watching them, was that every time we ever did it, at some point, the film would get jammed. Yeah. And you'd sit there, and you'd watch it, and then slowly from the middle it would melt outwards. And the picture would just, and that frame would suddenly be gone forever.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So then you'd have to cut it and put it together, and then so these rolls of film are full of little not deliberate edits, but edits that were a result of it getting stuck in and the
Yeah.
camera,
Yeah.
which I guess in itself is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah,
How
definitely.
the flow of stuff gets changed, not
Yeah.
intentionally.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it kind of brings out the physicality of film as well, and the sort of materiality of film. It sort of makes that obvious in a way. It's,
Which is a real shame thing as well, isn't it? Because that's, to all intents and purposes, pretty much gone.
Yeah.
I mean,
have you
who
ever
shoots film? No,
Well,
not many.
Not many people. No, it's very, very specialised now. Some artists do.
Yeah, sure, I get that.
So like Tacitus Dean, makes films and things and uses film. I mean, Nick, have you spoken to Nicky at all? Nicky Hamlin. He's like another colleague.
I spoke to Nicky months ago, but I should speak to him again because I've got a better idea of what I'm about.
Yeah, I mean, Nick is very much on the side of the kind of, I suppose, the medium, and what the medium can do and what it is in itself, and he tries to bring that out through his own work quite often. But he's worked with both film and video, so would have a lot to say about the differences between those two mediums.
Mm-hmm.
He's really fascinated by what's happening with film when it's kind of going through a camera, and the kind of the frame rate, and then the frame rate of the projection, etc., and the kind of way it's moving through a kind of mechanical thing with little sprockets and things like that. There's a kind of and it's a series of kind of discrete images. So he's kind of interested in all that kind of stuff, sort of frame rate and
I had a real interest last year. I went in down a rabbit hole for a while. After we had a class, and we spoke about Saving Private Ryan, the opening 20-25 minutes, where it's shot with a 45-degree shutter.
Oh right,
okay. And which gives it that highly, super sharp. Everything's super sharp, but slightly jerky. Yeah. So on a film camera, 50% of it you never get to access. That's the time where it's rejigging itself, pulling the next thing through, and then of the available 180 degrees, they only use 45. And what suddenly interested me, and I did 27 interviews last year with people about this. Actually, went and asked them what they thought. So if a frame is 1/25 of a second here, 1/24 in America or the movies, 1/25. So that's 1/25 of a second, but you're only capturing 1/8 of that.
Yeah.
What happened in the other 7/8?
Yeah.
Is there a different film there, or slightly? Or I remember working with a client once on.
So when you talk about that kind of 1/8 thing, is that the how much of the light is actually registering on the film itself?
So that's spinning.
Right.
That spins in front of the lens,
right,
and
okay.
this bit here, which is solid.
Yeah.
All right, is the time that the camera uses to go right. Got that frame, move that one frame up, pull the other frame into things, settle.
Oh, I see.
And now,
yeah, so this
of the available. So this takes 1/25 of a second to do a full revolution. All right, and half of that time immediately is lost. The other half's available for capturing light.
Yeah.
But you only capture light in 1/8 of 1/25 of a second.
Right, because of this turning.
Because it's turning.
Yeah, okay.
So 7/8 of that 1/25 is not captured, and you might go, well, whatever. When it's played back, obviously the frame sits there for long enough that we think it's a continuous thing. But the amount of time it's shown for is not the same as the amount of time it was captured.
Yeah.
And the reason it became interesting was because I remember it took me back. I suddenly understood. It took me back to sitting in a telecine session once with a client, and they were like, "I'm really looking forward to seeing this next shot." We have this thing, and someone's firing a gun, and it shoots. And when we looked at it, and it's like, "Where's the flash?
Yeah.
Where's the flash? The muzzle flash?" Well, what do you mean? Because when I saw through the camera, I saw a muzzle flash.
Right.
But it hadn't been captured.
Oh right. Okay.
Because in most simplistic terms, that was the bit of time that was captured, and the muzzle flash happened over here.
Yeah.
Or over here, and it didn't get
So
captured.
the
So he was
out.
like, he was convinced we'd done something to to hide this.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's quite a technical issue, isn't it? And I think if you want to go into that level of kind of technical detail, Nick is your man, I would say.
Well, what I did with it, I went and asked a whole bunch of people again, artists, directors, cameramen, camera assistants, telesony people, a whole range of people. And it was really interesting feedback we got from people going, well, yes, there might be a different film in the missing time. To someone else saying, you've got too much time on your hands, you need to get on with being alive.
It's really interesting.
And then a technical person going, yes, and this other thing has happened to me because of that, and blah, blah, blah. And so I collected all these things together, and then I thought, well, I should kind of do that again for the things that I'm worrying about, not feeling that I fully understand, or just want other people's opinions and takes and wisdom on things that I don't feel that and unfortunately I've wheeled it all the way back to what is art, which is suggests that I've not made very much progress since I've been here
I think probably what will happen, you'll just circle back all the time from what you're doing in terms of your own practice and the things you're exploring to the bigger questions, and it'll be just a continuous thing going on. So,
which I am enjoying, I've got to tell you. If on one level I sort of worry, because I'm like, wow, do people here think that I've learned nothing and got nowhere? But I'm like, no, I'm really enjoying trying to figure out what it is.
But I think you can get absorbed in certain questions. Like that is the sort of thing you could get absorbed in that question because it's something that happens because of the mechanism of the camera sort of thing, and what it's as an object, what it's designed to capture. And then it's the sort of almost like an existential question about the reality that's being captured by the camera, and what is present and what's absent, and what that relationship is, and it's all happening through time, So it's actually quite they're quite almost like philosophical questions you could ask about what's going on there, about sort of what's being registered there in terms of existence.
Well, the opening sequence runs 25 minutes. Let's call it 24 just for simplicity. And so I'm like, well, what's 7/8 to 24? It's 21. And so I put together a video of 21 minutes of black. And so this is the 21 minutes of black. This is the 21 minutes of the opening sequence of Saving Private Ryan that wasn't captured on film. Because that's all we know about it, isn't it? That it's just... We don't know. We don't know what's going on there. We don't have any. So it was a bizarre thing to think that certain moments were caught and other moments weren't, and just disappear, never to be known.
It's a really interesting idea. And I suppose it's quite discomforting as well because the idea of watching an element of film where there's nothing being shown as well is quite, that reminds me of sort of Guy Debord, who made films. Guy Debord is like this kind of not an artist but an intellectual, associated with the Situationists, and he made films at one point in his life, and one of which was I think a completely blank film that he showed, and then people rioted, etc.
After seeing it.
So so it caused a kind of a scandal. But shall I spell the name because it's French? So Guy is G-U-Y.
Yeah, got that.
How we would say Guy.
Yeah.
And then Debord is D-E-B-O-R-D. So you can look at him and his films, and I think they're pretty interesting as just sort of provocations, really.
But that's
films without images and things. And,
when you say that, I think that's what I'd like art to be. Is a provocation. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's.
Yeah, I think that's certainly. There's many examples of art that's set itself up as a provocation. Yeah, that's fine. That's I suppose provocation is when you're thinking about how the audience might respond, how the viewer might respond to what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of that becomes part of the work in a way.
Yeah.
What the viewer's response is.
Well, I think in a way what I was talking about with the projection and seeing yourself 10 seconds ago is, when you said the word provocation, I'm like, oh, well, I guess that is, in a way, you're challenging someone to...
So you're including the viewer in the work.
Yes.
And I suppose this is interesting in terms of film and video and things like that, and because normally the viewer isn't included in a way. When you go watch a film or something like that, you're kind of immersed in what's being shown essentially, and the film is it's almost like it's designed not to acknowledge you as the viewer. Do you know what I mean? Because that's how the process of immersion happens. Is that you're kind of you're in the film in a certain kind of way. But I think it's quite interesting to sort of turn that round and think about trying to incorporate the position of the viewer into the film and make them aware that they are a viewer of the film.
I hope in my thing because what's being projected, what they're coming to see is just me faffing about with some cables and a projector and installing stuff. And, there's nothing. The thing that's going to make them react is seeing themselves. Seeing the thing. So when you talk about movies, by the way, and not being a part of it, you need to go to. Sorry, it sounds like I didn't mean to be rude, but you need to go to see a movie in a black neighborhood in America.
Right. Okay.
Where the audience absolutely takes part. In the movie,
well, I think people used to.
And they'll stand up and they'll go, "Don't go in there! Don't! Oh man, whatever you do, don't!" And it's just like a non-stop. Well, I think audiences...
More like theatre. Audiences here, I think, used to be like that with film, but perhaps not anymore. But I think the early days of film, I think people were really involved. Couldn't help but get involved. But I think there is something about that being taken out of yourself that seems to happen with filmed images, and it's almost like as a viewer, you're kind of like a passenger in a way. You're being taken along by the film, and that's something to do with the how films. I'm talking about kind of mainstream film, I suppose, but how you're taken along in terms of narrative, and there's narrative time and there's the real time of the film as well, the duration of the film, and so you do often feel like a passenger when you're relating the film. But if you're part of the film, you can't be a passenger in a way, because you're an active sort of participant. The kind of thing you're describing, the work that you're envisaging. The viewer is kind of part of it. They're an active participant in the film in a certain kind of way.
Yeah, they're the biggest bit of it, and that's the reaction I presume is only going to be to seeing themselves react to something fairly humdrum and mundane in many ways, quite deliberately so. I walk up thinking maybe they're going to see some and it's not. Cables being unreal, cables being plugged in.
I think
the
it's
back
interesting.
of a thing being unscrewed, being screwed back on again.
I think you should definitely look at Dan Graham, because Dan Graham has also written a lot as well. So he's like a theorist of his own work and of the work of others. So you can get some kind of interesting ideas, I think, probably from Dan Graham. So if you check out his kind of collected writings, things like that, which we've got in the library, there's a couple of books of collected writings by him, and he's very kind of articulate, and he's a kind of thinker, as well as someone who's making work. So, but I definitely think you'd get some things from him, get some ideas from him.
And then, if you want to do video type stuff or installation stuff, what do you do when you leave here? How do you be an artist who does that kind of work? I get a painting. I can do a painting and then hand it over to you.
People do sell film works. Obviously it's harder with installation. But installations are bought, but not very much, and usually you have to be quite famous, and it's bought by a museum or whatever. But film, you could, it might be good to talk to someone like Mike, who Mike Marshall, don't you?
Yes.
So because Mike has sold films, he's an artist who makes films, and he kind of sells them, and usually films for the purpose of selling, you just produce a limited edition of films, but then so they have a certain kind of value because there's only so many of them, that kind of thing. So you can sell film works through galleries and things like that. It does happen, but obviously painting is the sort of like quintessential portable object that is very sellable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can say that's partly why it's still so sort of present as a medium in a way, is because it has that about it as part of it. But there's lots of art that's difficult to sell, and there's art that is impossible to sell. And often artists have kind of played with that as well. Deliberately produced work that can't sell. Because they might be interested in the commodity character of art. And how sort of value is given to art. In a kind of economic sense. So. So there's all that kind of stuff as well. But, I mean, that's not really a helpful answer to your question.
Well,
but
I wasn't.
But, you can talk to people who like Mike, who has sold films and just.
I guess I was asking more, not so much because I wanted to know how I could sell my work if anyone were remotely interested, but more how do video artists, how do they survive? What makes video art still keep going if it's so hard to sell and...
Yeah, well, I suppose it's like, maybe it's sort of commissioning, being commissioned to make work by galleries or museums, or you may be represented by a gallery or something like that who are able to sell works to museums, and then often with the kind of gallery set up, this gallery provides a sort of income or a retainer, for an artist. But it certainly is way more complicated than selling paintings. It's a completely different area.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole question of how artists make a living, is a really difficult question as well. It's not a straightforward thing.
No.
And even obviously quite well-known artists don't really make any money at what they're doing. And that's why you have artists who are teaching in places like this.
For sure.
It's like it's one way of earning a living.
Yeah.
And sustaining a practice as well. So, I think quite often, the career of an artist will have lots of kind of ups and downs as well, where you might sell a lot of work at one time, but then there might be a long time where you don't sell anything at all. So it's a precarious sort of existence.
See, you must need to have a passion to keep going through all those ups and downs, and to have a passion, you must be wanting to say something somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there is a thing about art, isn't it? Is that there is a commitment to it, and you must believe in something that you want to express sufficiently that you'll put up with the downs as well as the...
and I guess you will kind of arrange the kind of like material side of your life, the need to earn a living and all that kind of stuff around that practice. If that's the thing you value the most in your life. So a difficult question. I'm not the right person to ask about things like that because I'm an art historian.
No, but I think you are the right as a result because you have a broad picture of many artists, don't you? And how they manage to get by and why the whole thing keeps going and why.
Yeah. Actually, Dan Graham's got very interesting artwork. I keep going back to Dan Graham for some reason, but he did a very interesting conceptual art piece where he kind of set himself up as a limited company, and the idea was that the people who invested in him were not. It was nothing to do with the works that he was producing. It was to sustain his activity as an artist. And I think it's called income piece. Something it's like a classical conceptual art piece, but sort of thinking about that in a way, thinking about an artist where there are no kind of like objects. You know, the objects don't come into it.
Mm-hmm.
So the objects are something being bought and sold. It doesn't come into the equation, if you like. It's missed out somewhere along the line. But you know, not that he didn't succeed, of course. But you know, but it's an idea, but it tells you something about the role of objects in art, and what kind of function they serve within the art world, and you know, all that kind of stuff.
Last week I was trying to do some general reading around stuff, just so that when I went into these interviews I'd be a tiny bit less stupid and maybe have some informed things to fall back on. And one of the things that one of the artists I read about, and I can't remember her name now, so I need to go back to that book and check, but she went to a large, well-known gallery and took down a number of pictures that had been there for a long time, and then asked people who worked there and were regularly there to each write something about the piece of art that had been there.
Right, okay. Yeah.
And then she put those up to replace the picture that had been there. And then in the bottom right corner or something, put a teeny weeny picture of what had been, of the picture that had been there.
Right, okay.
And what was really interesting was that all the people who wrote about what had been there, they're entirely different. So, you know, say you're the guard that sits on the corner and I'm the guard that comes and relieves you, and someone else is the curator, and someone else is and whoever. And every person wrote something entirely different about the picture that was there.
Right, okay.
Which kind of made me think that then even looking at a picture is somewhat performative as well then, isn't it? That my interpretation of it, there's not a correct interpretation of a picture either, is there?
No, exactly, yeah.
That what you see and I see doesn't have to be the same at all, does it? Isn't.
Yeah. No, that sounds like a really nice idea as well. Actually, one of our final year students has made quite an interesting work that's just down there, just down the corridor. So, you know, just the first room you go in on the right, there's a video.
Is that the red room?
It's a kind of the red project. It's not the red studio, but it's the room before that, where I think you've had
seminar room.
Seminars in there. And there's a kind of 3 video, you know, film on one side, and then on the other side is work by one of our students called Grace, who and she made, it's basically like a sort of a film. I haven't had a proper look at it yet, but it's a film that she made about the other works in the exhibition. So she's filming other students' works and making a film out of those film bits of other people's works. And that sounds like it's quite interesting, because it's about the exhibition in a certain sort of way. It sort of captures the exhibition. But it's almost like some sort of meta level, you know. Which So you know, so it's maybe worth having a look at that, you know, that film.
I will on the way out from here for sure. I always like the idea of you know how, like you might have been at the pub and you and a friend and you're disagreeing over some fact, something, and before the time is done, and you get home and you look it up on Wikipedia. So you look up the thing, what you know, who played lead guitar on this track, on the third, you know, on this album, blah, 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 and who engineered it, and you look it up and there's the answer. But you're reading that article, and then there's all those other links within it, aren't there? Yeah. And inevitably, because you've had a couple of beers and what yourself, you click on one of those. Right, so you've left your initial question, and where do you end up 7 clicks later? Like where do you go as opposed to someone else from that start point? You know, you've got the whole of Wikipedia and everything's linked somehow, isn't it? Where would you end up? And I would like the idea of letting kids or anyone do a similar sort of guided thing through a museum. So like you go, okay, this is your start picture. Now write me 6 other ones to see here. That you know, of the ones that you did. What is your route through this show as opposed to my route or their route or something like that?
Yeah.
Because again, that's just, I mean, that's could be
Yeah,
fascinating,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. You can make your own connections between things. And
Precisely.
You can produce your own narrative.
Yes.
As as you move through a number of things.
Yeah. And again, it not being, you didn't make the work. It's your meta. You know, how do you want to go through it?
Yeah.
Just to say, I'm sure that film doesn't include every single thing in the show that's been on show here. I doubt it can. Otherwise, I mean, it sounds like it'd be incredibly long and But they will have made some kind of judgment about what order to show them.
Yeah, I suppose that's a big part of art, isn't it? Or it's kind of relatively recent art that it kind of, there's a lot of art that uses already existing culture, already existing images and things, and does something on top of them.
Mm-hmm.
So it reorganises things in particular sorts of ways. So that's I suppose that's a big part of I suppose postmodernism in general. So kind of like a sort of period. It's that kind of reuse of culture,
and I think
putting it into different shapes.
Wait, when you go to the supermarket or something, I mean, they sell so many different things, and what is it, tens of thousands of your average big supermarket has, like a big Sainsbury's, has some vast number of products or something. How do I get your attention to look at this one or that one? And so, not necessarily that's art, but design is not far off it, is it? I mean, there's Andy Warhol then, isn't there, all that?
But that's very much your previous life, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
It's thinking about how to grab people's attention and things like that.
It is, and then, I mean, what is Instagram and Facebook if not just vying for your
absolutely.
attention?
For attention, I think attention is really interesting, isn't it? To think about how attention is, what it is, what attention is, and how it's sort of marshalled in some way. How it's brought to some sort of focus. Interesting. We've got a lot of ideas going on, so.
Well, no, thank you very, very much. I've been trying to